but they are not. It doesn't take a whole lot to register as an investment company. We need a clearly defined investment objective. We need semi-annual reports to shareholders. One of those reports would be an updated prospectus. We need minimum assets of $100,000. There are other items that you need to check off on a checklist, but for your test, I would be aware of these three when it comes to registering an investment company. We need a board of directors. This is a part-time entity. Typically gets together on a quarterly basis. They manage the investment company as a business entity, so they're making some important decisions every quarter regarding the future of the investment company. On the board of directors, we need some public representation. The standard mix for public representation is at least 40% non-interested. That's the public representation. So at least 40% non-interested, which means a maximum of 60% interested. If the investment company charges 12B1 fees, and 12B1 fees are not levied by all investment companies. This is an asset-based distribution fee. It's an annual expense of the client, and it's taken out on a quarterly basis. It is used for advertising and promotion and distributing the fund. If that client is being charged 12B1 fees, they get greater public representation on the board. So now, instead of a minimum 40%, it's a minimum simple majority. So that means at least 51% of the board needs to be non-interested. There's that annual fee charged quarterly, point 2. Maximum 3/4 of 1%. This is also referred to as 75 basis points. This is a term you could see on the exam. I would remember that it takes 100 basis points to equal 1%. So 75 basis points is 3/4 of 1%. 50 basis points would be 0.5%. 25 basis points would be 1/4%. If we're going to market ourselves to the public as being no load, not charging a sales charge, the maximum 12B1 fee is 25 basis points. So in other words, if I'm marketing myself to the public as a no-load mutual fund, I'm not allowed to jack the 12B1 fees up to the ceiling. I'm limited to charging 25 basis points for the asset-based distribution fee. Some of the board responsibilities include setting the investment objectives and the dividend and capital gain distribution policy. They do oversee the custodian, the investment advisor, the transfer agent, and if there's an underwriter, the underwriter. We'll talk about those shortly. And they also manage that 12B1 policy. So here's our fund manager. The term is investment advisor. The investment advisor is a firm. It's not an individual. We know there's a portfolio manager, usually an individual, but it's not just one person. If you're managing $20 billion. I hope it's not just you. I hope you have some help managing that money. So, investment advisor is the firm. There's a portfolio manager. They are managing the portfolio. There is a written contract. The fee is a percentage of the net assets managed. And this is the largest expense of the fund. Maybe 0.5%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it sure does add up when we get into the billions of dollars. The custodian bank is the safekeeper of the assets. So they hold on to the securities and the cash. They hold on to important documents and contracts. They're the safekeeper of the assets. Kind of like a firewall. The investment advisor is managing those assets, but the custodian bank has possession. And the transfer agent, that's the record keeper. Great name for the transfer agent is the record keeper. They keep track of names and addresses of dividends distributed and shares redeemed. They also are involved with customer services. Most of the time today, we would find the transfer agent in-house. Used to be more of a third-party contract, but today I think you'll find the transfer agent is mostly in-house. So we've got fund expenses. Everything that we've talked about so far, other than the 12b-1 fees, are fund expenses. So we have the board of directors, the fund manager, the custodian bank, and the transfer agent. Those are all fund expenses. Legal and accounting would also be a fund expense. We know who's really paying for everything, but we do refer to these as fund expenses. If we take all of the fund's expenses and divide them by the average assets under management, that's the expense ratio. This is material information. This is information we would find in the prospectus. And customers, they understand who's paying for everything. They like to see low expense ratios. So we've got this product. We just need to sell it. Now we could sell our product directly to the public. If we're selling our product directly to the public, this will be a no-load fund. It's not charging a sales charge. Or we could hire a lead salesperson for the job. That lead salesperson is referred to as the underwriter or the sponsor or the distributor. Most of the time it's the underwriter, but it could be referred to as the sponsor or the distributor. They are a FINRA member. One of the jobs of our underwriter, sponsor, distributor might be to go out and contract with some of the 5,000 broker-dealers that are doing business in America to see if we can get them to sell our shares to their clients. It's one of their jobs. So if they're going to go meet with another broker-dealer and sign a contract, that other broker-dealer would also be a member of FINRA. Anytime you see the term underwriter, sponsor, or distributor, there is a sales charge. And they could be paying for the advertising and promotion. Gotta wet my whistle. We know that mutual funds are priced via a formula, and here is the formula. We have this terminology called net asset value and public offering price. The net asset value is per share is determined by taking net assets of the fund, assets minus liabilities, and dividing that by the number of shares outstanding. That's the formula. Whoops. That's the formula. It's really all about the assets and liabilities. If the portfolio holds ABC stock and ABC appreciates in value, that's going to have a positive impact on net asset value per share. If ABC decreases in value, it'll have a negative impact on net asset value per share. It's really all about that portfolio and what's in it. Buying and selling shares has no effect on net asset value per share. If you're buying shares of the mutual fund, you're increasing assets, but you're increasing the number of shares that you divide by. The end result is no change. If you're selling shares of the mutual fund, you're decreasing assets, but you're also decreasing the number of shares that you divide by. The end result is no change. Buying and selling shares has no effect on net asset value per share. The rule says that the net asset value per share must be determined at least once per business day. There's nothing that says that it can't be calculated more than once per business day, but it does need to be calculated at least once per business day. Typically, those shares are going to be priced at 4 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time. It doesn't have to be 4 o'clock Eastern Time, but that's when the markets close, and that's a pretty good time to price the shares. So if a customer were to write a check to purchase a mutual fund at 9 o'clock in the morning and the shares are priced at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they don't know how many shares they just purchased. And they won't know until those shares get priced at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. By the same token, if somebody entered a redemption request at 9 o'clock in the morning, they don't know what the size of the check is that they're going to be receiving. And they won't know until those shares get priced at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's why the pricing of mutual funds is referred to as forward pricing. We always have to move forward to the next available price to determine the number of shares purchased or the value of shares redeemed. It's called forward pricing. Let's take a look at changes in that net asset value. There's the net asset value unchanged. Purchases and redemptions of shares, which I talked about. Buying and selling portfolio securities. Simply exchanges cash for equivalent assets or assets for equivalent cash, leaving net asset value unchanged. Net asset value changed. Unrealized appreciation